Welcome to the 2015 Can It For a Day. I'm your host, Jessica.
And I'm Chef Sarah Page.
And we're coming to you from our Fresh Preserving Kitchen. So before I get started, I just kind of want to go over what we're looking at when you're watching this broadcast. So you have your screen. In the corner, you'll see two little arrows that you can actually click on to expand your screen or minimize it. And the best part about the broadcast today is off to the right. Regardless of when you're watching this broadcast, you can actually type in questions, and someone from our staff will actually answer those for you. So like I said, regardless of when you're watching this, always feel free to ask us questions because that's what we're here for, is to help answer those for you today. So Chef Sarah, tell us a little bit what we're working on this afternoon.
Well, it's the end of summer, and the peaches are really just about to go out. So I wanted to make a peach jam before it was too late.
Right.
So we have some beautiful yellow peaches. They're local Indiana peaches. And we're going to be making a very simple peach jam today using our Ball Fresh Tech automatic jam and jelly maker.
Fantastic.
Which takes a lot of the effort out of making jam. I'm going to show you how to do it real quick. But the first thing I wanted to show is that I think a lot of people get a little bit intimidated by having to peel peaches because it's not the easiest thing in the world.
It's kind of a pain, actually.
We actually have lots of instructions online, freshpreserving.com, and in our Ball Blue Book, how to blanch peaches to take the skin off. And I'm just going to show you quickly. This is a peach that I blanched earlier. I put a small X on the bottom to score the skin. And I simmered it in simmering water, about 180 degrees, for only 30 to 60 seconds. And then I plunged it in ice water to stop the cooking. And you'll see that now, because I blanched it, I'm able to really pull the skin off so easily. And it makes a little effort out of a big
Well, it just
jam.
peels right off, right?
It peels right off. And it might seem like a pain to actually have to go through it, but it makes it so worthwhile, especially if you're doing a lot of peaches.
Well, you know, and if you choose not to blanch and you're trying to actually peel, you lose so much of the fruit.
You do.
Just there on the skin. So this is a great way to save a lot of that, especially, you know, if you have a small yield and you're trying to make your jam, you don't want to waste any of that.
Yeah, it's about choosing the right technique for the job.
Right.
And it makes it a lot simpler. So let's get jam making.
That sounds like a great idea.
So this is our Ball Fresh Tech automatic jam and jelly maker. It's something that many of you are probably familiar with. And it's something that allows you to make really quick small batch jams.
Makes 4 8-ounce jars.
It does, which is a great amount because it actually uses only 2 2/3 cup of chopped fruit. Today,
Yes.
like I said, we're using peaches. Now, peaches are a fruit that's very low in natural pectin. So it's a great fruit to use our Ball Classic pectin with.
It is.
So the first thing we do is we put our 2 2/3 cups peaches in. We sprinkle 3 tablespoons of pectin on the peaches. And we're also going to add 2 tablespoons of bottled lemon juice. And this is because peaches can be very sweet, especially if they're very ripe. And their pH is a little high.
Yes.
We need to keep the pH below 4.6. So sometimes the riper the peaches get, the more that pH can creep up.
Right.
So in order to prevent spoilage, we want to make sure that the pH is well
Some of
below.
ours were pretty ripe today.
They were very ripe. It's the end of summer, so here we go. So now we have our pectin and our fruit in the jammer, and as well as our lemon juice.
Yes.
Now we're going to just hit jam, and we're going to hit enter, and you'll see it starts to turn. Yes. Now in 4 minutes, it's going to beep,
right,
and that's going to tell us when we're going to put our sugar in. So we have our sugar pre-measured here.
And I'll give you this.
Okay.
So while this is stirring, a little tip as well, you can actually add a little dab of butter to this, and that's going to prevent foaming at the end if you happen to have any foaming. So little tip when you're making jam, regardless of whether you're doing it in the Ball Fresh Tech automatic jam and jelly maker or if you're doing it on your stovetop. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about pectin and the different types of pectins. And we actually offer 4 different varieties. We have our classic, which we're using today. We also have a low no sugar, which is great if you want to try to watch how much sugar you have in your diet. We have an instant pectin, which is great. It's a no cook. It's the only no cook we have, and it's fantastic, especially if you have small children. It's something you can get them involved in, and you don't have to worry about them being at a hot stovetop. And then our liquid pectin. So, you know, a lot of people want to know if you can alter recipes and change out your pectins, which they are not interchangeable. So I'm going to show you some examples of the peach jam with different pectins because maybe you're looking for a certain type of texture or flavor. So we've got actually, I'm going to move your sugar over for a second. So we've got our classic.
So now pectin is all natural. I want to talk to people a little bit about what pectin is.
Sure.
And I know that in the science segment, you covered this, but just in case folks didn't watch both, I want to make sure they understand what pectin. Pectin is a naturally occurring fiber in fruit.
Right.
So it's a natural substance.
Yes.
But some fruits have very low amounts of pectin.
Some are very high, like cranberries.
Yep, cranberries. So pectin is what allows us to achieve a set in a jelly or a jam.
Right.
So if a fruit has its own natural pectin, like cranberries, you might not have to add extra pectin.
Correct.
When do you add the extra pectin?
So it's just going to depend really on which recipe that you're preserving and what you prefer. The great thing about pectin is, since it is a gelling agent, it allows you to cook your pectins for a lot less time, getting more of that fresh fruit flavor. Traditional jams and jellies maybe that you're familiar with from your grandmother or a great aunt or somebody, they may have just cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked it down to that point, which really gives you more of like a caramelized flavor.
That's right.
Versus a fresh fruit. So it just, again, depends on what you're looking for. And we do have recipes in our Ball Blue Book that do not call for pectin, but today we're just going to focus on the ones that do. So I've got all 4 here. So with the classic pectin, which is what we use today, right here in this particular package, you're going to see it's a little bit darker, right? There's a lot more sugar than the lower no. It's going to have a more firm set because of the sugar, and it's going to make it that darker color too. So here is our low no. You can see it's a little bit lighter than, actually it's quite a bit lighter.
It is, yeah.
Than the classic. So this is a lot less
And
sugar.
this was the same peaches you used,
The
right?
same peaches, the same batch. I sat there in my kitchen and did everything. And the great thing about our pectins is you can actually do as little as 1 jar or up to like 8. So I did 2 jars in a batch. It made it really simple. Then our liquid pectin, it's a little darker, but it's going to be a little softer as well. And then the softest of all of them will be our freezer jam. So this is the one I was mentioning is great for if you have children, you don't have to worry about cooking or anything. I'm actually going to open these up just so you can kind of see a little bit of the difference between the 4 to kind of give you a more clear picture. We'll start with the classic. I'll use my SureType band tool. I never get to demo this, and this is like my favorite part of this tool.
You know, I need to get one of those. I don't have one at home, and I was trying to undo lids this weekend, and I sure wish I had one of those. My nails were not.
So as you can see, this is really, really jelly, like real thick, and it's got a really strong,
tight set.
Strong set to it. Yes. Oh, I'll let you go ahead and add
Okay. So
sugar.
now we're going to be adding the sugar to the recipe. Those 4 beeps told us it's time. So we're adding only 2 cups. We're doing a reduced sugar recipe. We're going to add it all at once. And then we're going to put the top on. Thank you, Jess.
You're most welcome.
And that's going to cook, I think, for another 18 or so minutes.
Around there. The whole process is a little over 20 minutes. So here is the lower no sugar, and you can see the color's a little bit brighter, and it's got a good little set to it, but it is going to be a little bit softer than the classic. Moving on to the liquid.
And it's also going to have more of a fruit-forward flavor because it's got less sugar in it.
Yes.
So the fruit is going to be more of the star in the recipe.
Okay, so here's the liquid. We're talking soft here, folks. Soft. Beautiful color.
Yeah.
But just a lot softer set. And then this is going to be very soft. Oh, duh. It was freezer. It's not going to seal. And then this one is going to be a lot softer.
So that's almost like a compote. You could have that over ice cream or
on your waffles. Or, I mean, any of these you can mix into a smoothie. And you can just, I mean, I don't know how well this is coming off on camera, but just the color too, so much richer with the classic. And then again, this is a little bit softer. This is still quite firm. This is, I mean, lots softer. And then that one's just basically going to run down. Now, again, we have recipes, obviously, here's peach in 4 different versions. So we offer you a lot of variety and a lot of options for when you're making your jams and jellies. So it just depends on what you're looking for. I personally prefer the low no sugar. I make all of my jams and jellies with the low no sugar. I don't like a lot of sweet flavor. And the classic's just a little too sweet for me. But some folks I love this, and some folks love the instant, and
Well,
some
I had
folks
some
love liquid.
apricot jam this weekend I made with the classic, and I took a little spoonful actually, and I mixed it in with my white wine. It was delicious.
Yes, almost like a sangria at that
It
point.
was, yeah. So, I mean, there's lots of stuff you can do with it. Even if it's a little bit sweeter than you might want to spread on your toast, you can use it for, you know, you can use it for different things. You can make a glaze out of it.
You know what I love?
What's that?
We actually did a fermentation class and made yogurt.
Oh, yeah.
And I
Stirring
mixed
it
that in
into
with my homemade yogurt. Oh my word. It was awesome. So here's a little bit. Hopefully that kind of helps you determine maybe what type of set you're looking for, what kind of flavor, and that will help you determine which pectin's right for you and which jams and jellies you prefer. So I'll move this out of the way and I'll let you talk about.
Oh, the electric
people
water
are probably
bath.
like, what is this?
Oh, okay. So
What
let's
is
talk
this?
a little bit about this. This is our new electric water bath canner and multi-cooker, and we're really proud of it. It's a new appliance that we've been working on here for the past couple years, and it just came out last year, I guess.
This year, like March, I think.
March, yeah. Years flying by. So it came out in March, and the thing that's great about this is that it allows you to do water bath canning off your stovetop. So if you have a lot of stuff going on, if you have a small kitchen, or if you have a glass top stove like my friend Jess here, which traditionally you can't use a regular traditional water bath canner, right?
Some of them, it depends. So
or
if
is it
you-
a pressure?
Well, if you have a glass top stove, the first thing you want to do is actually contact the manufacturer of that appliance just to make sure that it's safe for home canning. Mine is not. There are many on the market that are, so it's very important to contact them first. If they say that it is safe for home canning, then you want to make sure you use a pot that does not exceed your burner by more than 1 inch. As well, it needs to be completely flat on the bottom. So there are a lot of things to remember if you're trying to can on a glass top stove, which is why I don't have to remember anything, and I can just use this appliance.
She's got this appliance now in her home. And I do too, and I use it for a lot more than canning. I use it for steaming vegetables before I dehydrate them or before I freeze them. I also use it for blanching when just like I was explaining before, when I'm blanching a lot of peaches or tomatoes. It's wonderful. We're using it now to heat the jars because you have to heat the jars before we make our jam. The jars have to be tempered. Not tempered, that's not, well, it is actually technically the right word. You need to heat up the jar so to prevent any chance of thermal shock when you put the hot jam in. So,
and if you've ever had thermal shock, it's when the bottom of your jar literally just pops off. So that's a clear sign of thermal shock. So to prevent that, pre-warm.
Yep, so we always pre-warm our jars, and this appliance has a setting for pre-warming. So it will never go above that 181 degrees that you want the jars to pre-warm at. So we have our jars in here now. It's also, once we fill the jars, we'll be taking the jars out one by one to fill them with hot jam and then putting them back in. Once they're all filled, we'll turn the appliance up to the canning. There's actually on here it says canning, that's the top setting, and it'll maintain a full boil.
And we made it really easy for you. That whole section is green, so you turn the knob all the way to the green section.
And it'll maintain a boil for as long as you need it to, and that's really important for safety.
Absolutely.
To make sure that you process your jars for the appropriate time.
Do you want to show my favorite feature on the side?
I think I know your favorite feature. Check this out, people. Oh,
we have it plugged.
We have it plugged.
Oh man. Okay.
Kind
well,
of anticlimactic. So it has this wonderful drain spout. So there's a food grade silicone plug in here that's preventing it from draining for safety. But if we were to take that out before we filled it with water, we would be able to drain it directly into the sink, not have to carry the pot across the room to the sink, which is always a hazard. So this is
I've got to go like 4 feet from my stove over to my sink.
It's really heavy.
It is. It's quite heavy. 21 quarts of water is a lot of water.
We've used this. We had our Halloween party last year here at the company, here at Jarden, and we used it for mulled cider. And we served it from the spout, so that was fun. The other thing I really like about this is that it actually nests. You can take it apart, and it actually nests into itself. So storing it is really simple. The base comes off. You can store the base inside the pot, so it's very easy, and you can turn this upside down and store the lid upside down.
So basically it's the size of the pot.
It's the size of a pot.
It's awesome. The cord actually comes unplugged. It comes with a rack. It's always important to preserve having a rack of some sorts. It comes with a rack. It comes with a steaming tray.
Yep.
Actually, I've got that right back here.
And the steaming tray is also helpful when you have a full load of jars in here, you can put the steaming tray on top to minimize the spattering.
Yeah, it gets pretty, the boiling is kind of not
vigorous.
well distributed. So this kind
Yeah.
of helps distribute all of that weight across there too, so you don't have to worry about your jars tipping over or anything like that.
And I want to talk about some of the other stuff, the
for
multi-cooker
it.
aspects of this. When we developed this, we knew that right away we saw that there was all this other potential for it. So I was able to develop recipes. I have a pulled pork recipe that serves a crowd. This is 21 quarts. So I have a couple big batch soup recipes. There's a chili recipe in the recipe booklet that comes with this. And there's a cider recipe, a hot mulled cider.
Yep.
And so you can use it at a tailgate.
I was going to say, if you're set up for that, you absolutely could.
Absolutely. Or use it like for a church dinner.
Carry-ins.
Yep, absolutely. Potlucks, pitch-ins. So
All of the above.
Yeah.
It does a little bit of everything, which is so great.
And another thing that's really great about it, I don't mean to interrupt, it cycles on and off to maintain a consistent temperature. So if you follow the directions, the recipes in the book where it'll say simmer the meat or simmer the soup on a certain setting, it'll maintain that temperature by cycling on and off.
Right. Which is really cool. So
It is really cool.
It's a new product to our line that we think is really great. I mean, all of our Fresh Tech appliances make preserving so much simpler, and that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that it's easy and simple and fun, and above all of that, safe. You can always go to freshpreserving.com to get recipes that are going to be tested and approved following current USDA guidelines. Chef Sarah's been working a lot on that. But you can always go to that source. We have our brand new 37th edition of the Ball Blue Book out, which is also a great resource, and the complete book. A lot of you who've been canning for a while are probably pretty familiar to all of those resources, but for those of you who are new, check those out. You can also go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/ballcanning. We occasionally post recipes and ideas on there too, so check us out for sure. But I love this appliance, and I can't speak highly enough about it.
Well, I really started loving it when I started doing other things with it, not just water bath canning, but when I had to blanch a whole bunch of peaches, and when I had to steam a whole bunch of, I was doing a big batch of dehydrating different vegetables, and being able to keep this on my counter and just trade out the vegetables one for the other, just keep putting them in, and it was so much easier and safer than doing it on the stovetop.
Right. I think it's great. So hopefully you guys checking it out for the first time are as excited about it as we are. It's an easy way. It stores up easy. It's easy to put together. It's easy to use, and above anything else, it's safe to use.
It's portable. That's the thing I like about it too. I can put it in the back of my car and bring it to my friend's house, and we can do canning there. We could make a big batch of chili there.
Have a canning party, and everyone can all hang out together and do that. I'm excited because summer's coming to an end, and it's almost football season.
I know. I was thinking I have to bring one of these to my cousin Renee because they do the tailgating like crazy. So she'll love it.
Well, I think too, just even if you're like trying to bake a recipe that you're preserving, this is just like having a pot, any kind of pot, on your stovetop.
That's true.
So I could have a batch of chili here, I could have my pressure canner going. Obviously not at my house, I have a glass top stove, but at my mother's house I do a lot of preserving there because I have to. I love my mom, but I have to go over there quite a bit. So, but this is a great way that I can actually do both of that. And I've talked to many consumers who have multiple appliances. They have 2 of these because they're doing so much canning, and this is a great way. I mean, this handles your 7 quarts, just like your regular canner would. So if you like to do larger batches, this is great for that. Our auto canner that some of you may be familiar with would only do 3 quarts. So that's great for small batch preserving, which is awesome. Sometimes if you go to the farmer's market, maybe you just have a little bit too much, but you got ambitious and you thought you were going to make a big meal. Now you could preserve just a few, but this is a great way if you're doing larger batches.
This is the standard size, right? And so this will handle all your traditional recipes, from your Ball Blue Book to the recipes you've been making all these years.
Any tested recipe is going to work great in this appliance. So with our auto canner, we do have very specific recipes, and so this is a great way to have, if you have both, you can do any recipe out of all of those publications with this appliance.
It's a little more flexible, definitely, and I love it because I can and then I can stop to make dinner. Because I'm not taking up the whole stove with my canning. So if my husband wants to come in and make dinner, or if I need to put something, if I need to put my work aside for a few minutes, I can. It's not like I have to move everything off the stove.
Right. I like that a lot because it's just, I only have 4 burners.
Yeah.
So I haven't been to your house to really, well, I've been to your house. I haven't really looked at your stove to see, but I could see where that would be a great benefit for a lot of folks, even if you're even just meal prep.
Yeah.
If you're doing lobster or something, you could have different things going on. So
absolutely.
Like when we say multi-cooker, it is legitimately like the ultimate
oh, for sure.
appliance.
I see this on I see this at tailgates. I see this close to the beach where you could be steaming your mussels and making your lobster, doing your clam boil up there in Cape Cod.
Right.
So I think that it's really changed how I can at home for sure, for the better.
I'm thinking we have a coworker friend who's with child, so baby shower, we can make up something. She's always making good, delicious treats for us. We could totally pay it back and do something like that with her. So I'm going to take a look real quick to see where we're
almost there.
I can't see very well. We're getting awfully close for sure.
Well, see, it's foaming up a lot. Now, if we had put a half a teaspoon of butter in there or margarine, it would foam less.
Right.
But it's still okay. It's you're just going to have to wait. Once we finish it, it'll take a minute for the foam to subside, and then we can also scrape it off.
Well, it's also so hot when it finally gets done with that cooking. I mean, it's boiling. So basically, if you're not familiar with this appliance, it's our automatic jam and jelly maker, and it's just doing all the stirring. So typical recipes, you'd be on your stovetop, whether you were doing a pectin-less jam or jelly, same thing with our classic, our low no sugar, or liquid, those are all cooked pectin recipes. So you'd be stirring and stirring and stirring and getting this facial because of all the steam coming
Oh yeah, but you can still smell it. You're not getting the facial, but you still get the smell.
Yes, you do get that. We do have little holes, little vents around the lid, so you still get to smell that, which I love to use this before I have company, because then who needs an air freshener?
Yeah.
My whole house smells like I love to make the mixed berry jam. It's one of my favorites to make in this appliance, and then my whole house smells amazing.
Yep.
So it's really, really great, but I don't know if you've ever done that before, but the stirring and the stirring and the stirring, and literally this is one of those things where you can just push some buttons and we can get our jars pre-warming. We could be washing our lids and pans. For those of you who may or may not know, we no longer, you can still simmer your lids if you choose to, but we now recommend that you don't even have to. Like you simply can just wash your lids and pans, which we did earlier, and just set them aside and have them ready to use. So you could be, during this time while it's cooking, washing your lids, getting your pans ready, setting out all of your gear, which I was doing while we were talking about.
Or chatting with your girlfriend.
Right, or even better yet, going to facebook.com/ballcanning. You can find us at Ball Canning on Facebook, on YouTube, on Pinterest, on Vine.
Yeah.
You name it, we're out there on social media. And we, like I said, on our Facebook page, we're constantly, like every day, have a brand new post with more information. Our teams here, we try to get on there and answer all of the questions. We have a great fan base. I love going out and looking at the pages because we also have some international pages now too. If you didn't know, we've moved into Australia. This is why it's International Can It 4 Day actually, because we went to Australia first, then moved into South Africa, and just recently, within the past few months, into the UK. So pretty exciting times around here in our office for preserving around the world, really, which is really cool. So
taking the world by storm.
Who wouldn't love this, right? It's fun. It's a great way to preserve your foods. They're shelf stable for a year. You can't beat it.
And it's really cool too because every culture has their own preserving tradition. And I think Ball is at the forefront of the science, right? So we're making sure that every recipe that we develop for you is tested and safe. And we have engineers working with us in our lab in Muncie to test the pHs, to test the sugar content. We can test the internal temperature of the jar, so we know exactly when the jar is safe and how long we need to cook each recipe. So we have techniques and ways of knowing the best cooking length and technique for every recipe that maybe they didn't know 30, 40 years ago because they didn't know exactly what was going on inside the jar. But now we can.
And that's what's so important. We actually have quite a few consumers who call in. They're like, hey, I've got this recipe from my grandma, or hey, I was thinking I'd like to add these flavors to this recipe. Can I do that? And typically, we recommend against that. You can always add dry seasonings to your recipes to give them different flavors and make them unique. But altering the recipe, we always we hate saying no, but we have to, right? Because as Chef Sarah was saying, there's so many things that go into it. It's the density of the food inside. I mean, and then the bigger the jar, that's going to change your processing time. Like, it's so easy, and I hate for you to feel like this is complex, but there's a lot of science that goes behind it. That's why we always say, follow our recipes. They're tested, they're approved, they're always going to be safe.
Well, and if there's a recipe that you've had in your family for years, and you just want to make sure it's safe, send it to us, and we'll look at it. And if we need to, we may even test it. So, okay, so now, ooh,
It's real hot.
it's very hot.
I'm
So
gonna
now
grab-
it has stopped cooking, and as you can see, the foam is going down. It's still very hot. It's like
Yes.
molten sugar, so be very careful.
I'm trying to decide how I want to pick this up. I know how I'd like to pick this
I'm
up.
wondering, I should have gotten tongs.
Actually, a paper towel down there would probably work just fine. I'm going to actually take the stirrer out because that'll help us when we're scooping this into.
I got it.
You sure it's hot?
Yeah, I got it.
Shake it off. Shake it off. All right.
Okay, so she's going to the sink with that.
Yes.
So now we have our jam, and it's ready to put into the jars. Do you want to demonstrate?
I would love to do that.
Okay, and
That would be
I'll be
fantastic.
the
So we have our
lid
jars
lifter.
pre-warming in our electric water bath canner. And what's important is you want to take one jar out at a time. So I'm going to grab one of our nice warm half-pint jars.
You'll see a lot of people online do assembly line filling, and that's not something that we like to see here. We take the jars out one at a time because we want to make sure that they stay hot.
Right.
And that's for two reasons. That's not only to prevent thermal shock, but it's also to make sure that the internal temperature of the product in the jar is as hot as possible, maintains that hot heat as long as possible.
Right, and as I mentioned before, if you experience thermal shock, the bottom of the jar literally just pops off. And if you want to get me a little damp towel.
Sure.
So this recipe calls for a 1/4-inch headspace. I'm getting pretty close, so it's always important to, even though, I've been doing this for many, many years, and I still always measure the headspace. Because I've been doing this so long, it's just on mark. But you want to make sure that you actually measure the headspace. This is important to make sure that you get a proper seal. And then right now I'm just wiping off any food particles that may be present on that food. Start with red. Again, you no longer have to never boil lids because they'll over soften the compound. You no longer have to simmer these. You simply can just take this, place it on to fingertip tight. That's basically when you get some resistance just a little bit further, but we also have a tool, the SureTight Band tool that's going to work for both regular and wide mouth jars. So if I wanted to use this today, I would simply place this on, shut it down. I'm going to actually use this to hold. And then when you turn, you actually will see these two arrows on the band tool itself meet. And when that happens, you know you're at the perfect torque, and so you can just stop and let go. But this, you don't actually have to turn this, you don't make this bend, it actually bends on its own when it gets to that position. So pretty easy. Grab this,
There we
drop
go.
this bad boy in. Gonna grab the next one. Now some people have recipes where they just simply fill the jars, and you hear about like inversion and people not processing. Those are no longer recommended. They're not safe any longer. So if you do have a recipe where it's calling to do those things, you may want to go to freshpreserving.com and see what the most recent recipe indicates you to do for that recipe, just if you want it to be shelf stable for a year. Certainly you could do that and then place it in your refrigerator for up to 3 weeks, or you can freeze it once it cools if it's in a freezer-safe jar. Up to a year.
Now, we're probably going to get less than the 4-jar yield because we used reduced sugar. The standard recipe calls for 3 1/3 cup sugar, and we only used 2 because we wanted to do a little bit less sugar recipe. So we'll have probably more like a 3-jar yield.
And that happens, and that's
does.
okay. I mean, all of our recipes state about, right? You're going, depending on the ripeness of the fruit, you're going to have it, or the way you even chop it and prepare it is going to also change. So your final total yield is going to be altered by that. So don't get discouraged if your yield isn't as high. That may happen, that does. Certainly give us a call, and our consumer affairs team would be happy to walk you through that and try to pinpoint what may have been occurring. But typically it's just the way the food itself is prepared. And then grab this guy here. All right, so I think we're actually going to have less than a full jar here, and that's okay. I'm going to give you a little tip. So we measured the headspace earlier and talked about, that'd be fantastic, how that's important for making sure that you get a good seal. If you ever have a jar that is not to the right headspace, if it's too little, then you actually want to go ahead and let that jar cool, regardless if it's jams, jellies, you know, green beans, stew, anything that you're making. You do want to go ahead and put that in your refrigerator and enjoy now, and not take a risk of that seal coming undone. That would be terrible to put all this effort and all this love into making a recipe only for it to come unsealed because the headspace was too great. And you can also freeze. So something we talk about, and you can find this information on freshpreserving.com. And so like you can see right now, that is way too great of headspace, but that's okay. It's still going to be delicious and wonderful.
That'll go into the fridge.
This will get cooled off and go right into the fridge or the freezer, because this is a freezer-safe jar. So again, if you go to freshpreserving.com, go under products, click on jars, and there will be a little chart on there that shows you which jars are freezer safe. But an easy way to know the difference between a freezer safe jar and a non-freezer safe jar is does it have shoulders, right? And when I talk about shoulders, where you screw your band on, we typically refer to as the neck. So like a human, we have a neck and shoulders. If your jar has a neck and shoulders, then you do not want to freeze in that. Some people get confused and they think, oh, my boyfriend, for example, he actually was like, well, all wide mouth jars are freezer safe. And I was like, no.
I thought that for a long time.
They are not.
And
so,
I was wrong.
Yeah, we'll get people who call in, they're like, man, my quart jar broke or my half-gallon jar broke. And unfortunately, those are not freezer safe. So we do have a variety of jars that are freezer safe. The jelly jars, all three sizes, the 4, 8, and 12 are all freezer safe. This 8-ounce jar is freezer safe. Our 1.5-pint jar, the tall, thin, kind of skinny asparagus jar is what some consumers call it. It's freezer safe. So we have a lot of varieties, and the wide mouth pint.
Yep.
So lots of varieties, but just keep in mind you want to actually let these cool because it is hot, just like the reverse of pre-warming jars, right? You want to let this cool before you place it in your freezer. So I'm going to sit this over here on this towel.
Okay.
So it's out of our way.
I'm going to crank up the electric water bath canner to all the way to the green section where it says canning, and that's going to take a minute or two to heat up and start to boil. Now, you don't start timing until you get to that full rolling boil. That's when you start your timing. And this is a 10-minute process. So at the end of 10 minutes, we'll turn the water bath canner off, we'll take the lid off, and we'll let it sit in the water bath canner for 5 minutes just to cool down.
Right.
We just want to make sure that it's as safe as possible coming out of the jar, and it also lets the food inside the jar stop boiling and moving around. It's just safer.
Right, it just helps bring, and that's actually part of the processing, you know. So a lot of folks maybe think, I processed it for the 10 minutes or the 25 minutes or whatever the recipe is indicating, and they pull their jars out. That 5 minutes is part of the process, which sometimes people forget. So it's always important to let the kind of naturalize in there and whatnot. And this would also be the time that if you choose to use this, that you would have this on top of your jars.
We could put it on top.
Sure, let's do it. You just drop this in. There you go.
And that's the splatter shield. It's going to keep it from splattering up and causing any kind of burning.
Well, right, and also
potential.
too, you know, sometimes folks call in or they email us or get on Facebook and they're like, man, my canner, the lid's bubbling and bouncing all over the place. This is going to prevent that from happening as well. So if you're using a traditional water bath canner on your stovetop and you're experiencing that, a couple things to think about. Maybe you have your water too high, and then when it's boiling, it's causing that to actually kind of bubble, and you'll get water spurting out everywhere. And also too, you may have too high of a rolling boil. It's almost like violent. You can still have a good rolling boil with a little bit of a lower temperature. So something to think about, little tip for you today as well. So in the real world, what we would be doing now is cleaning up our kitchen and doing other things while we're waiting for these to actually start processing. But we'll magic kitchen it a little bit. How do you feel about that?
That sounds good.
Okay.
So we're going to
act like these.
Yes. So it's our 10-minute time has expired. Our timer has gone off. So we are turning off our electric water bath canner. We are
All right, so at this
Covering.
point, you want to remove your jars. We'd be removing them one at a
Yes.
time. So we'll just say, we removed this one, right? And you're going to want to place it onto a towel or a wooden cutting board. Just like we mentioned earlier, when you're filling your jars, you still don't want to put this on a cold countertop. Thermal shock is real, and it's such a disappointment, right, when you experience
spend
that.
a lot of time and effort
So
peeling the peaches.
right, so then you would take your next jar out and you place it. You usually want to leave about an inch or two in between the jars just because it helps them cool a little more evenly. So again, however many jars you have, you want to set them out and let them cool.
Now you're going to do that for about at least 12 hours, right? Leave them at room temp, leave them sitting to cool before you check the seals.
Yeah, so 12 to 24 hours, and at that point, you want to come back and look at those. So, you know, sometimes people get really excited because they hear that ping, ping, ping sound as they're pulling them out, which is like the most rewarding sound to hear because you're like, yes, it's working. But just because it makes that ping doesn't mean that it's going to stay sealed or that it is sealed. Jars can actually ping multiple times. I've had that happen where it's like, wait, that just pinged. And then like it does it again. So it's okay if that happens.
I've heard jars ping in my refrigerator sometimes. I mean, jars that have been open for a week or so.
Right.
But I'll take them out and put them back in, and the change of temperature will make the lid ping. Which
I hear it all the time in my laundry room. That's where I store some of my jars. Some are in the garage, but I constantly just that change of temperature, and you'll hear it. So yes, it's something to get excited about, but you have to remember that doesn't necessarily mean that they're sealed. So,
That's
and
correct.
also something when you take them out of the canner, you may realize or notice that the band's kind of loose. Do not readjust that band. It's very tempting. You're like, oh, I want it on there, but you don't because it's venting. All of that heat's coming out of that jar, and that's going to pull that lid down, and you don't want to disturb these jars at all because that would be terrible as well.
it would be. Yeah.
It'd be so sad. So leave them alone. I know it's really hard to do that sometimes. I get really excited, but leave them set. And then 12 to 24 hours later is when you would come and you would check your lids. We're going to imagine that these are sealed. You would actually look to see if the lid was concave. So if it's concave, that's a good sign. I also like to go around the sides and kind of add a little pressure just to make sure that it has a good vacuum seal. And once those things are good, I wipe them down. It's important to wipe them down. Sometimes siphoning happens. I'm sure you've experienced that with all of your testing, and those food particles can spoil on the outside of your jar, which is kind of gross. So clean off your jars. Then you would just store them simply like this. If you choose to store with your band, make sure everything's completely dry before you put that back on there, just because that rust may occur. And then it's such a pain to try to get that off.
sometimes it's impossible to get it off. And
Yeah, we've got our Sure-Type band tool, which also will remove bands, so that's something to consider when trying to remove them. But I prefer our guideline of not storing them with the bands for the pure fact that, say maybe I got kind of sidetracked and maybe I was talking to you on Facebook because that's what I do sometimes, and maybe I didn't watch how long I actually processed and I guessed and my food happened to spoil. If you store your jars this way, the bacteria in your jars they're going to have like a smorgasbord, they're going to eat away, and they're going to create a lot of gases, which will pop your lid off. In some cases, it could fly clear through your pantry, and you may never find it. But you want to make sure that would give you
at least you'll know.
absolutely, you're going to smell it. You're going to be like, wow, where'd that lid go? So keep that in mind as well. But once this is all good to go and everything's clean and dry, you place it in your pantry, and it's there for a year. That's the best
great.
part.
Yep.
And it's safe.
Well, this has been a great experience making jam with you again in our brand new kitchen.
Yes.
This is our 2015 brand new fresh preserving test kitchen, and it's a really inspiring space to work. And so thank you so much,
Oh,
Jess,
thank
for
you.
coming in.
Well, I always have a great time with you, Chef. And so something to remember, don't forget, off to the right, you can ask us questions anytime that you're watching this broadcast, and we'll make sure we get those answered for you. So we'd like to thank you from the Fresh Preserving Kitchen for tuning in to our 2015 Can It Forward Day broadcast of Making Peach Jam. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.